Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the this event, which is going to look at external events in Microsoft Teams. My name is Paul Edge, and I'm Deputy Head at Ribblesdale High School, and I'm responsible for everything we do in terms of the EdTech Demonstrator Consortium, but also the use of technology at Ribblesdale and beyond as well. And I'm going to hand you over initially to Lee Small, who's an Assistant Head at Ribblesdale, who's going to take you through the consortium and then through into how we can use Microsoft Teams to support the external events. So thank you for taking the time to join us, and I'll hand you over now to Lee.
Hello everybody, and once just to echo what Paul said, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We know it is a very busy time at this moment, so we appreciate you giving us some of that time.
You've gone to mute, Lee.
Hello. Is that
okay,
better?
You're back again. Absolutely.
There we go. Okay. So basically, as Paul said, this webinar is really about external events with Microsoft Teams and how we can set that up and the different ways that we can do that. So just to start off with our consortium, really, and we're a consortium of 3 different schools, and the reason why we are an EdTech Demonstrator School or a consortium is due to our effective use of using technology to support teaching pedagogy, which is obviously important. And we also have a diverse makeup of 3 different schools within our consortium, and we are well equipped to offer any support to secondary schools, primary, and also special educational schools as well. And what we like to pride ourselves on is giving that real life experience of how EdTech can be used to support education across the whole organisation, and hopefully be able to learn from our mistakes as well as we move forward. So what can we currently offer? Okay, so we offer a variety of digital platforms. We can offer support with Microsoft Teams, Google Platform, Seesaw, and a variety of different platforms that schools currently are taking to ensure that remote learning and the blended learning is actually taking place. A strategy on how to make sure that remote learning and hybrid working is effective, and also very important at this time, making sure that the children and our staff that are using these systems are also kept safe. As we have Highfurlong with in our consortium, they are able to offer that specialist SND support and also that special education support as well. And ourselves as a secondary school and Hambleton as a primary school, as you can see, we have that diverse makeup there. We're also looking at how we can use technology to basically support the well-being of staff and pupils, but also to look at the CPD that staff still want and require, especially at this time when new technologies are being more and more used within a classroom environment. But I suppose the most important thing is to ensure that the schools that we do support have a sustainable strategy, that it's not just a quick fix, something to fill the plug really until we go back to normal, because any strategies that we do want to introduce within education should be sustainable and should be able to help us and our pupils move forward as we do, and hopefully in a collaborative way. So just to give you an idea about ourselves, which is Ribblesdale High School, a bit of school context. So we're a local authority school, 11 to 16, and we have a very mixed cohort of our students. And there's around about currently 13,000, probably actually from September, we're up to close to 15,000 students at the moment, with a very range of different backgrounds. And what we do is we use Office 365 basically to support teaching and learning, and to make sure that learning across the school is effective, and supporting those outstanding teaching techniques, which we might do from our traditional teaching pedagogy. And at the moment, we currently have over 1,000 of our students or pupils with a one-to-one Windows device that they have access in school and at home. And also our Year 7s will be also receiving the devices as soon as possible, that we can give those for our students to ensure that their continuality of learning takes place. So currently we're in a transformation stage in education, and at this moment in time, if anything, our current climate has shown just how important technology can be in ensuring that pupils and staff are given the education and support that they require. We live in a great time, great change of education on the educational platform at this moment, and technology is there to help us to ensure that we can support our communities. But we're also able to give these pupils better tools and ensure that our staff and our community are given the skills that they will need to succeed in a 21st century as they leave our education. As you know, we are using platforms like Microsoft Teams at this moment in time, and these are platforms that they will go on to use when they leave education as well. And also to give students basically and prepare them for that future, and ensure that they are given an education that they currently understand within the 21st century. And that is currently what we've got to consider as we move forward. So external events, okay? Why do them? Okay, so as a school, normally, why do we do external events? Okay, we do it for stakeholder communications. We want to build relationships and engage our communities. And we want to keep parents informed. Basically, we also want to make sure that pupils are provided with all the experiences that schools should offer. And as a school within these current times, we really want to keep things as normal as possible for our pupils and our staff, to keep things running as normally as we possibly can. So when we start to look at possible events on what we currently do, we have parents' evenings, open evenings, welcome evenings, rewards evenings. So there's a variety that we have there, but a lot of the time there's others events that we don't consider. So what about school collaborations and the network events that many of our teachers and our aspiring middle leaders and senior leaders are currently missing out on? Okay, what about our virtual visits for our pupils? Can we offer that? Just because we can't physically do it at the moment, there are other ways to do that within the virtual means. And just because we can't physically be there, it doesn't mean that as a school we should stop offering those experiences to our pupils and our staff. Now I'd like to introduce Paul back, who is going to give basically an overview of how Ribblesdale has currently taken this down and look at our live events as we have moved forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee. So I think Lee's sort of hit the nail on the head, really. He's mentioned it a couple of times. What we want to do at Ribblesdale is try and keep things as normal as possible. So that is to make sure that we maintain those communications with parents, to maintain the communications with other stakeholders. And as with all schools, we've got a published calendar, and it's just the way we actually stage those. And it is a challenge. So it's how we're going to do parents' evenings, how we're going to do year 6 to year 7 transition, how we're going to do those welcome and those information evenings for year groups like year 11 that we do every year. And I think it's imperative, very important that we do that. So just to talk through the next slide, I think in terms of different teams events and how you can run those, there are two types. At the moment we're sat in the meeting, and no doubt now you're absolutely sick to the back teeth of Teams meetings. What was nice to see when everyone joined, which wouldn't have happened a few months ago, is that everyone comes in with mute and with the camera switched off, which means that people have moved on in how they use it. But the thing with Teams meeting is that it's very much about collaboration, and although we're not using it like this at the moment in this sort of webinar, towards the end of the webinar we will invite people to ask direct questions, and you can come off mute and you can talk to us and we can collaborate. And they can be, if you want them to be, very interactive. So that means that you can interact with the people that you are talking with within the meeting, and it's a two-way conversation, and that obviously leads on to discussion. The thing about meetings, though, Teams meeting, is that there's less control. So me sat here now, if you all decided, and not saying you want to do this, but if you all decided to take your mute off and then switch your cameras on, I can mute you all again, but you can keep taking it off and you can leave your camera on because I can't affect that. So I haven't got much control as one of the meeting organisers, as it were, to do anything about it. Teams meetings do have a place, and it's very much before you decide on running an online event, whatever that may be, you've got to decide on the format that you want to run that best fits. The majority of things we've done so far as a school have been around meetings because it's been smaller group. However, we have now moved into using live events, and the Teams live event is where essentially you've got one or a small number of people presenting to many. So this fits very well with the open evening model where you are trying to get across information, and maybe you're trying to get across information from a number of different sources. That might be live, it might be pre-recorded, all different elements you can pull in there. And as I said, it's about sharing that information out. There is some input from the attendees, but it's limited to a chat window, and I can take you through that later on. But it does give you more control, so you are very much orchestrating that live event rather than in a meeting where there's less control. So when you're doing that sort of one-to-many, maybe it's an open evening, maybe it's a year 7 transition evening where you want to just give them the information where we're up to at the moment, but not necessarily promote much interaction and discussion, then that's the way it could happen. And when we've done live events, the 2 or 3 we've done, for example, on the school open evening, we used the Q&A panel very effectively in the fact that people ask questions, and we had a couple of people online answering questions straight into Q&A panel. As you can imagine, what that has done is it's probably cut down on lots and lots of phone calls into school asking the various questions, because if people could see the Q&A and the responses, then ultimately they're not going to ring you about the same question. And the really good thing about it is you can moderate that Q&A as well. The other thing it allowed us to do is if we answered some of the questions, but there seemed to be themes coming out, then we put together FAQs that we then sent out with the recording of the event. So those who couldn't actually attend also get an FAQ, which links to what most of the people, the attendees who did manage to attend the live event, were asking. And I think it's very much about being slick in how you use the time and the technology to reduce the workload, particularly on maybe the admin and reception staff, to make sure that people are getting the information they want. And I think with everything, the good thing about both is that, like we are doing today, because we'll post it afterwards on our EdTech website, is that it can be recorded. So I think the other thing to consider, and I think we are doing this more, although we're talking about live events and communication tonight, I think it's very much about, is that the right thing to do? Is a sort of an asynchronous pre-recording a better model rather than doing an absolute live event? Because that way then people can dip in and out when they want to be. Now, obviously that's a different way of thinking, but it does seem to work very well. And you can look at it in different ways by potentially doing sort of premieres via YouTube, where you do release it at a predetermined time, for example 6 o'clock, and we've done that with our year 11 information evening a couple of evenings ago, because we felt that was the right way to do that. So the right type of sort of platform for doing that communication and those meetings and those open evenings or whatever it may be, making that decision is absolutely key. So what I want to do now is just take you through, particularly, I think meetings are okay, but it's very much about live events. So the first thing to just outline for those, about live events, and those of us who have not really looked at it, is there are essentially 4 types of person in a live event. That can be the organizer, and that's a person responsible for sending out the invites and setting it up originally. There's then the producer, who actually is the person who orchestrates the live event on the evening, much like a producer would do in a TV or live broadcast setting. What we tend to do at Ribblesdale is the organizer and the producer generally can quite often be the same person, maybe one of the technical support people who's doing that. Then obviously you got your presenters, and you can have as many presenters as you want, but normally, you know, a few presenters is probably enough. And then obviously you got your attendees. Now, all of these different roles have different responsibilities depending on who they are and what and the amount of things they can do. But the key person or the key role in this is the producer. And if we just flick to the next slide, what we can start to see is how we start to set this up. So before the event, very much like a meeting, you would set the event up and you'd invite the producers and the presenters. Now, as I said, it might be the producer is the same person as the person who's setting the event up. The other key thing is that there are a number of settings that you must do in terms of making sure they're correct from the outset, because once you set these, you can't change them. So, for example, the recording and whether that's going to be available to the attendees or just to the producers and presenters, whether you want captions on, whether you want to track attendee engagement, and the one that I think is key really is the Q&A. You might decide that you don't want to allow question and answer. There might be a live event where you think, actually, we do not want to do that at this stage, and we'd like to get the questions in via another method into school, maybe to an email inbox or maybe a Microsoft form or whatever it may be. So again, that's another decision to make, but please make sure that you have decided what you want, because if you move on from this and make it live and set the event up, you can't change them. And then the final bit is that you can then get the attendee link. So this is where you'll generate the attendee link, and that then can be shared out by whatever means you would like to do that, whether that's via email, whether that's via an app you use, whether that's via a text message, whatever method you use to share out that information, you can then share that link out to the attendees. So before the event, very similar in some ways to setting up a normal Teams meeting. Next slide, please, Lee. So during the event, this is where the fun bit starts, and I would strongly suggest you have one or two dry runs on this with everyone involved before you do one of these live to the world, because it is a slightly different way of working. As I've sort of said a couple of times, the producer is in control of this. So the producer is queuing up content and then sending it out on the live event. So as you can see on the left-hand side, and I'll just flick onto that and just do my control key here. So hopefully you can see there that window on the left-hand side is where you pull in the content that is essentially pre-live. That is what is going to go live in the next sort of section of the presentation. When you send that live into the right-hand window over here, okay, if you send it live into this right-hand window, then at that point, then there's no going back because that's live. At the moment, and it's a little bit small on the screen, but you can probably make out a box around there that's sort of an amber color, a yellow color. That's showing that this is a pre-live situation. So at the moment, this event has not started. And when you start the event and when you make it live, the boxes around the right-hand window go red, and then up at the top, it will then say live in this area here. And that's key, really, that red means, I always say to the presenters, red means danger. In other words, you are live to the world. So whatever you do and whatever you say is live, and everyone's going to hear that. And what you can then do at the bottom, and there's only a couple of windows up here, but down at the bottom, essentially the producer queues up the content from various presenters. So it might be the image like you're seeing of me at the moment presenting, it might be some other content, maybe a PowerPoint, it might actually be a desktop where they're going to demo something. But essentially the producer can line up along the bottom all the content pre-lined up, pre-organized in the order that they're going to send it to pre-live on the left and then make it live over to the right. And that way then, if you have that and you have that timeline, then it becomes a lot easier as you work through the event. One thing we found is that with live events like this, a dry run through is an absolute necessity to make sure everyone's happy about how it's going to work, and particularly how the transitions are going to work from one section to another or one person to another, because the transitions are the place where things potentially can go wrong. And the other thing just to note is a really cool feature down at the bottom here. You've got a window, so that could be a PowerPoint presentation, but alongside here you've got me as the presenter. So this dual view, as it were, is really good because it allows you to still be seen by the attendees, but also whilst you're presenting against some content, whether that's a PowerPoint or even, as you can see in this one that's on the screen, you can use your desktop and demo something from the desktop. So it is very, very powerful. And then ultimately you've got the QA window that I was saying, the Q&A window, and that would come up normally down the left-hand side over here. And what I would suggest, if you are using a Q&A window, that, as I mentioned before, you have someone lined up on the event who's going to answer those questions that come through. And when the questions are answered, you can either reply to the person who's asked the question, or you can reply to the whole attendee list. So if it's something that you think would be useful for everyone to understand or have the knowledge of, then you send it back and post it to everyone, and they can see the original question and the response you've given. If it's something just that needs to go back to that one attendee, you can do that as well. If you think there's a question there that you don't need to reply to, you can just ignore that and carry on, or you might want to address it at a later stage through a different channel. So again, it is a powerful way and a very different way of doing it, not to a normal Teams meeting, but does give you a lot more control, particularly during the event. Just one thing to note, even if you are not the live person, so if I'll go down to this at the bottom here, but if this person was live, then they would have a red box around them to show that they were live. If you are not live and didn't have a red box around you, the event or the attendees at the event can still hear your microphone. So please make sure that you mute if you are not actually presenting, if you're going to do it in this way. So that's during the event, but please do 1 or 2 dry runs through with everyone that's been involved in the event, because it's not quite as straightforward as just jumping on a Teams call and it sort of works. Okay, it just needs a bit more planning, but it does look a lot slicker. So after the event, there are a couple of things that you can get. So after the event, you get this sort of window here, which gives you various options. So you can get a recording, and the recording is available to all the attendees via the original attendee link. So after the event is finished, if they click on the attendee link, they will be taken not to the live event, but to a recording of the live event. The one thing to note on that is you can't edit that recording that has been stored up on the SharePoint site at all. So it means that whatever you recorded during the event, they will be able to see. If you decide that you need to edit it a little bit or chop a little bit off the front or back or in the middle, then you can download the recording. And this is a newish feature actually in Teams live events. You can download it, but at that point then, once you've downloaded it, the attendee link and getting to the recording via the attendee link will not work. So if you do download, you can edit, but please bear in mind that you will then have to share that content, that recording, via another platform, whether that's something like YouTube or whatever you decide to use. Obviously, you can no longer get to it via the attendee link because you've downloaded it. But that does give you the option to edit it and make it look a little bit slicker if you want to. And of course, if you want to use that content elsewhere and chop it up for another purpose, then you are likely to want to download it, and therefore you've lost the power of accessing via the attendee link. The second bit, and I've mentioned this before, is the Q&A report, and that's at the bottom. So in the Q&A report, you can get an Excel spreadsheet which outlines what has been asked, and it will also give the responses that have been made. And as I've said before, we've used these really effectively at sort of year 6 transition evenings and school open evening in terms of putting together an FAQ that will allow people to have a look at the questions that were more readily asked throughout the live event. So there are a couple of aspects that allow you to use after the event and can be really beneficial. But again, the big benefit of of a Teams live event over a meeting is that you do have a lot more control on what you are doing rather than on a normal Teams meeting as we're set up here. I think it's absolutely important that you make sure you choose the best method of communication. And I think, as we were saying to a lot of people before the summer break, don't automatically think that just because it seems to be in vogue and everyone's doing it, live lessons are the right thing to do. Quite often, asynchronous, pre-recorded content will do the job just as effectively or more effectively, but allow people to choose when they access that. So, as you're all doing, no doubt, and I'm sure you're all in the thick of this at the moment, thinking about how you're going to do things, consider what is the purpose of this event and how is the best way to sort of get that information out to parents, whoever it may be. So, quick whistle-stop tour through Teams live events. And there are things available online around this, and we'll put this obviously up on our EdTech website when we've finished today. But I'm now going to hand over to Lee, who's going to just take you through the other aspect a little bit more around doing events through a normal Teams meeting, because there are one or two things that just to bear in mind as you're putting that meeting together, not through live events, but through a normal Teams meeting, in terms of sharing invites and things like that, just to be aware of, that will probably save you a lot of time and a lot of heartache. So I'm going to hand back to Lee now. Thanks very much, Lee.
Hello, and thank you for listening. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the processes that I take to set up a live event, a live meeting. Unfortunately, we can't really do that at the moment for a live event, just due to us actually going through a current meeting. So now, the reason why we're looking at this is because we are currently aware that parents' evenings are coming up, and a lot of us are thinking, okay, how can we maybe set up a parents' evening, or what type of platform could I do? So I'm just going to give an idea, really, or a suggestion of something that you can maybe think about, take away with you, and understand kind of the processes that I would take if we were setting up, external events using the meetings. Now, I'm sure that most of us will probably be aware that when we want to create a calendar or an event in Microsoft Teams, we click onto our calendar and then we press our new meeting. Okay, now just a couple of things. Obviously, if you download or just press the little down arrow, there's your live event. So that's everything that Paul's just spoken about. Now, like I say, unfortunately, due to us having a live call at the moment, I can't click onto this one as it won't work in the same way, but I will send out this video for you all to have a little look tomorrow. Okay, so what we would do is, or what I would do, is the first thing I would do is I'd select the correct time. So let's say if we've got a meeting tomorrow at 3 o'clock, so I would simply select it, or a parents' evening happening at 3 o'clock, and you press new meeting. Now, a lot of us will understand this and actually realize, yep, okay, this is simple. Okay, I know this type of thing. So we could say meeting time, but there are some very, very important things you need to consider. So we need to do meeting time, and then what I would do is I'd make sure that the time is correct. So let's say it was from 5 o'clock till 2 o'clock, and then you give a brief description. So this is explaining the event. Now, the first thing that you'll notice is I haven't added any attendees. Okay. Now, there's a reason for this, and the reason is if you insert attendees in here, and that means everybody you want to attend your meeting, the email addresses of everybody in that meeting are going to be visible to everybody, which obviously is a breach of GDPR. Okay, so make sure that you don't put everybody's email addresses in here. But the issue is unless you place somebody's name in here, you will not get your meeting link. So what we do within Ribblesdale is I set up a colleague of mine, for example, Paul, and I will set this meeting up for Paul. I will invite Paul, and then I will simply press send. So that's just one colleague of mine. And as you can see, the meeting now is here. Now, a couple of things is I always then go back into it because there's a couple of things that are quite important to do. Okay, so, and this is the strange thing, but when you first of all set up your meeting, you will notice that you get an option now that says meeting options. Now that meeting options wasn't there before, and for whatever reason, only appears once you've set up your meeting. So once you've set it up, I can now go back in and I can press meeting options. So if this was a parents' evening, for example, what I would do is I would have every teacher set up their own meeting, and I would send out the link for that teacher's class to maybe the parents, and making sure that the settings are correct in a certain ways. So for example, who can bypass the lobby? When everybody tried to get into this call, you would have been placed in a holding area, okay, or the lobby. As a teacher, okay, or a presenter, I can see a list of names of people who are in there. Okay, so what I would do is make sure that only you can bypass that lobby. So as parents or potential attendees come into your meeting, they are currently waiting in a lobby. And you can also set, for example, announce when callers join or leave. Okay, so it's entirely your choice whether you want to have that. You might hear a little ding when somebody enters the call. You can see that, and also who can present. Okay, at the moment I've got everybody, but basically as a teacher you probably only want it to be me. So you set that setting, which means nobody can take over the control of that meeting. Okay, so that's quite important. Now the only other thing to think about is this section here. If everybody's waiting in that lobby, it asks you for a name. Okay, now obviously it's quite important that when you send out a list of instructions, okay, probably missed this part at the start really. One of the most important things before you send out an invite is ensure that everybody who's going to attend that meeting understands the expectations. So to parents, they need to know the expectations of what you want involved in that meeting. And one of them will be, as you're waiting in the lobby and it asks you for a name, please insert the name of your child. Okay, because otherwise parents will be putting their names, and unless they have, you know, a recognizable name to yourself, you aren't going to know when to let them in. And the reason why I think this would work is because when that works is I know that a lot of schools already use some sort of booking system within school. So as a teacher, you send out a booking system, all parents sign on to that booking system, and when they've signed on to the booking system, you can present that link to access the meeting, and the teachers can let in the potential parent, you know, the parents at that time, to have that consultation really and have that face-to-face meeting, which at the moment is very difficult to do. And because you've got one meeting, one area, basically the teacher can decide on who comes into the meeting and at what time. So as long as you have that booking schedule of when you're expecting to see John Bloggs as parents in, then you can let them in. And obviously that's something that within your school that you would need to think of, because although I'm showing you how it might work, obviously there's a couple of things to think about, as every school is different.
Sorry to jump in there, Lee. Just to sort of back that one up, you know, I think parents, seeing as if you are going to use Teams, it's unfeasible to set up an individual Teams meeting for every parent. We'll be there forever from a sort of admin point of view doing that. So what Lee's described, essentially making sure that all the parents end up in the lobby, and then as long as you clearly explain to them sort of the guidelines before the parents in, before they join the call in, that they put their son or daughter's name in as the name of the person joining, you can, as Lee said, let them into the meeting at the lobby at the pre-arranged time via your separate booking system. Doing individual meetings would cause an absolute nightmare and it would just run on. So I think doing it that way, but it's absolutely key, and I think that's a feature that most people miss in terms of those lobby setups, because it's, as Lee said, it's only available in meeting options after you've actually set the event up. So that's key, and that's one thing that we've initially struggled to work out how to do. Sorry to interrupt, Lee.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, like Paul said, one meeting area for one teacher is obviously the feasible way to do it. Otherwise, the teacher would have to be moving from meeting to meeting and wouldn't understand. You know, it'd be very, very difficult. Keeping it simple, one meeting area for one teacher, and the parent clicks on that meeting to take them to their lobby is probably the simplest and easiest way to set that up. Now, how do we distribute this to our attendees? Well, all I do is I copy what's in the meeting, okay? And then, as I'm sure we're all aware of, I will go to a new email. and I will simply paste that meeting into that email. Now that obviously sends the link, okay, and anybody who's attending today would have had exactly the same process here. You give the subject as you normally would, okay, and you would send this to your participants. Now just sort of one idea that we do is we use Eventbrite to set ours up, but I know that a lot of schools will use their data management systems to store parents' email addresses. Now, one thing that is quite a good feature of downloading it into Excel is the ease to put parents' email addresses or your email addresses into an email. So, for example, if you've exported it into Excel, and I have all of my participants today, okay, which would be myself, all I need to do is to just copy the whole just as you normally would. You just copy the whole column of the attendees, and then you just go back to your actual email and make sure that you do this in BCC so not everybody can see all email addresses, and you simply paste. And then once you first paste it, it will look blank. Okay, it's not an issue. Just type in your own email address, or I'll do Paul since it's just me today. And as you can see, it's now filled everybody within that BCC. And if I send that email now, everybody will receive that email. So it's not a manual process. If you can download those email addresses via either an Eventbrite or a data management system, for example, within Ribblesdale, we would use Sims, and we would be able to access those parents' emails very, very quickly. And then I would simply press send, and then parents will be able to access that meeting via here. Okay, or once it's accepted, they could technically go in to the email through their calendar. I suppose a couple of things to think about in kind of the process of managing this is, would you want each teacher to email parents, or is it better to have like a one document for each pupil with the correct links to the teachers? Maybe a bit like your report system might look like at the moment, that Mr. Small, to get onto Mr. Small's meeting, please click on this link. To get onto Mr. Edge's meeting, please click on this link. So it's all in one place and it's not distributed. Very, very simple. Maybe one document might be a good idea to kind of move forward there. And that's the only other thing that I would always consider to have is when you've actually held the meetings and you've run your session. So I'll just show you on here. It's also the bits and pieces that you have available at your disposal when a meeting is happening. So what you might want to do is you might want to actually, okay, and it has actually changed the setting for me, so I'm trying to see whether or not I can actually find it now, but there is an option that allows you to download the register. Okay, so if I show participants and I click this little arrow, okay, so and I can download the attendance list. So that means that anybody who's entered and entered the meeting at any time, you can see what time they've come in, what time they've entered, and that's a really good way to have a checklist to see which pupils or parents you've been able to consultate during that evening. And that's just something that's within that management. The only thing I would say is very, very important to do is, if I leave this meeting, I can't access that attendance list. I need to make sure that I download that attendance list when I am a part of this meeting, or I will not be able to be able to see that. And that's by simply clicking on your participants and just pressing on the three little dots, okay, and press download that attendance list. And that works in a really nice way to just see who you've spoken to, really, as a checklist. Okay, and I really that actually comes to the end of the demonstration. So we would like to open up the floor now to see if anybody would like to ask any questions or ask anything about the kind of live events and maybe some suggestions that you might have. I don't know if there is anything currently in the chat window, Paul.
I don't think there's anything come into chat actually, no. So if anyone wants to come off mute and ask anything, then that's fine. If not, the recording will be available, so you'll be able to have a look back. But also don't forget that if you need to ask any questions, you know where we are, and you can come and ask us. The one thing I would say, just to take, just in case before we sort of end, is that I think the next steps for us really are, if you want some further support, and we've done our webinar tonight purely on sort of events, but if you need some support for your school or college or organisation, then please reach out to the EdTech Demonstrator project, because we can support you one-to-one in terms of your tech journey. And it doesn't really matter where you are. Don't think it's just for those who don't know how to do things or right at the start. We have supported a whole range of different schools and colleges at this stage over the past term and a half. So please feel free to reach out. And I think the other thing is continue to sort of push the boundaries, make sure that what you are doing, you're comfortable with, but also try new things out. And we found that with our staff, that particularly around EdTech, the more accepting and more confident in trying new things. But the other thing I would say is there's lots of other support out there. So, for example, we're talking about Teams tonight. So the Microsoft Educator Centre, which is at education.microsoft.com, that gives a massive range of support in terms of Teams and Office 365, but also how to go about teaching in terms of the technology, from a pedagogy perspective. So please, make sure you look at those. There's lots of information on that site, particularly linked to Office 365, and make sure that you follow either Lee or myself. By all means, we're both on Twitter. And Lee's just flicked it over. Fantastic. So please, if you want to follow us or reach out to us in any way, you can private messages on there in terms of that support. But definitely, the web address at the top is our EdTech website. And if you go on there, it gives you details about how to sign up to get support from the DFE Demonstrator project. So there's just one question come up about a video of a demo using Teams live for a producer point of view. Again, I would direct you on that one to the education.microsoft.com in terms of an outline about how that works. We personally, what we've done is we had a play with it, as I said, in terms of doing run-throughs. So it does take a little bit of getting your head round, but it does work really well. So that's absolutely the way forward. Susie's got a question and using the hand up. So Susie, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, hi, sorry, I would have put this in the chat box, but I can't seem to find my chat box. It doesn't want to work.
Yeah, no problem.
It's disappeared. I just wanted to ask, when you're in a live event, can you still use the breakout room function, or is that only for meetings?
It's only for meetings. You can't use the breakout function. It's only in meetings, unfortunately.
Okay, great. Thanks. I just wondered. Cheers.
No problem. No problem.
Just regarding what Paul mentioned also about live events, I actually have got a little guide on how to do that. One of our colleagues has done a guide on how to do the live events, and I will attach that to the information on the follow-up email that I send out after this event.
Thank you for that, Lee. See, the things I don't know that Lee's doing. Fantastic.
Okay, so I believe that comes to the end of the webinar, if there are no more questions, and we would just like to say thank you very much for joining us this evening, and have a good day. And if you do or would like some extra support on EdTech, please do reach out, okay, and we will do our best to help you with that strategy. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.